Meanwhile, Andy Dunne here in studio. Hello.
How are you, Joe?
Very well. Leinster 21, Ulster 18, and Munster make it out of Edinburgh as well in a squeaky kind of way, 17 points to 13. So neither side, the general consensus being, neither side played the better rugby in those two games, but they found a way to get it done. Talk to us.
Yeah, I think certainly looking at I was covering the game in the Aviva, looking at Ulster, to me it reminds, say, Leinster 4 to 5 years ago, where they had to lose a couple of key European games first in order to find out how to win. And that's what it looked like to me from Ulster's point of view. I heard a snippet of Dan McFarland, adamant that it wasn't all down to Stockdale knocking on over the line or John Cooney's kick. But it probably was, actually. And
literally, of course, he is right. It's not all down to those two moments. But in terms of how these games ebb and flow, it's hard to look past them.
The Stockdale, I mean, he's just so electric. He's just like box office.
He was outrageously good when he had the ball yesterday.
Yeah, he was incredible. I think maybe his best performance I've seen. And the way, he dismissed 4 Leinster defenders with ease. He was running at serious pace, but Nigel Carlin was his coach at Irish under-20s level, and he was kind of on the record in an interview saying he used to give everybody a heart attack as a coach, because he's got this star quality, but you've also got your heart in your mouth watching him. I remember in the All Blacks game back in November, he got blocked down about 5 minutes before he got the wonder try, and so he had the balls and the confidence to another chip kick 5 minutes later against New Zealand. So he's not very Irish, you know what I mean? He's just got such explosive ability and talent. Genetically, he doesn't look like a typical Irish winger, the height and the speed. I wonder, was that a disadvantage for him? He's so tall to get down onto the floor as quick as he needs to get down. I mean, he was well in the dead ball area before he started to approach the floor, and that was a 14-point swing, though, in that match.
See, I mean, look, I think we're giving him way too much of a free pass to even bring his height into it. I know what you're saying. Maybe it's a bit tougher for a big man to get down.
No, it's not. I'm giving him a free pass. Like, it was.
You think of Shane Morgan stretching for the corner from metres out?
It's
there's no
real
rationale
excuse.
for it.
There's not.
Why would he not have gone down earlier?
I just think it's a concentration issue. He's still young and probably just needs to tighten up that last little aspect of his game, and I think he could be a world beater, But
do you, in your experience playing with young, explosive, brilliant wingers, do they have an aversion to diving over the try line?
Well, I
would have thought it's half the fun, Andy.
Yeah. It's a funny one, because this season now, there's been how many incidents? The Italian felt so sorry for Conor O'Shea in the Italy game.
Yeah, Marco Zanoni for Italy.
Freddie Burns and Jacob
Stockton.
Probably in the last 3 months that's all happened, or 4 months, so yeah.
Absolutely crucial matches for each of those 3 teams as well.
Yeah.
Like, not, it happened when they were 60 points up.
No, key moments on the scoreboard, key periods in the game. So
now Zanoni was practically belly laughing as he went over. There was maybe a hint of a Jacob Stockdale smile.
Yeah.
He'll never make that mistake again, I would presume. That's it. You just don't do that twice.
I'd like to think so. I'm sure he'll have a few sleepless nights. The other issue was, certainly in the Ulster game, I thought Cooney was outstanding.
Yeah.
And he's got this style of play that's very similar to what I'd consider, I suppose, the great French scrum halves. He's very dominant in terms of his what he does for the team tactically, how he marshals the team. And again, it's not typically an Irish trait. Over the years, we've always had our 10 being the more dominant person in the strategy and in the team tactics. But he really gave a sense of calm and control, and his execution for almost the full 80 minutes was top notch, except that kick. And again, that's probably something that's going to keep him awake at night. Actually bumped into his brother Fran last night. I was chatting to him, and he said he was gutted, and he felt very much like it was all his fault. And as good players will do, they'll be introspective and remember Eric Elwood had a great line as a coach. I don't know if their paths crossed down in Connacht or not, but certainly when Eric was coaching me, he would say, you make sure you kick the kick and let everyone else watch you going over. And I suppose his point was, you make sure you stay in the process. Don't look up kind of mid-strike. And it certainly seemed like Cooney he was tired when he was taking the kick. He looked up at the last second to see, was it going over, opened his chest a bit and hooked it. And I suppose on the flip side of that, watching Ross Byrne taking a place kick on a plant foot that was cramping was incredible.
I wanted to ask you about that actually specifically, because all of us, I think, we've had, if you've played any sport, you've probably been in a situation where you knew in advance of pulling the trigger that you were about to be in pain.
Yeah.
And it's not a lack of bravery that you don't want to feel the pain that stops you making a good contact with a golf ball or with a football or a rugby ball. It's actually just something subliminal happens and you just can't bring yourself to fully commit. So I'm sure you've been in that position where you anticipated maybe cramp like Ross Byrne or something else. Whatever about enduring the pain and the bravery, which can be all overblown, the actual difficulty of executing your kick as normal. Yeah.
Well, it was his plant foot, so...
Makes it easier?
No, makes it much harder. Okay. His plant foot was cramping, and
so all the force goes
everything.
Through the plant foot,
he knew all the force was going to come down through that leg. But I think that from a situational point of view, he hadn't had a great game. He'd
missed your kicks.
He'd missed some kicks, and I've seen Ross Byrne play far better games for Leinster, where he's exerted a greater degree of control throughout a game regularly than he did yesterday. I think yesterday he was guilty, along with a number of the Leinster players, of trying to pass their way out of trouble against the Ulster's rush defence. Yeah. They were really, really fast off the line. I think Darren Cave was sweating about Ringrose and didn't give him an inch because he was worried about giving him an inch.
Just a brief tangent. Is that the norm, that type of defence for Ulster?
Not as aggressive, no. They have not been... I covered the Racing game, and it was a group stage match up in Ravenhill, and it was entirely different.
Yeah. It almost struck me...
It was a bit of an ambush. Like, it was
you saw what England did against Ireland.
Yeah.
Let's try and replicate that.
Yeah, and I think they did it brilliantly. And it's very hard to commit to that for a long period of time in a game because your energy levels will sap. But as I was saying, where Ross Byrne, as a younger 10, we saw Owen Farrell and Finn Russell in the Six Nations vary in their game by chip kicks and grubber kicks to try and reduce the speed, I suppose, off the line of the opposition defence, where Ross didn't do that. He kept trying to pass his way out of trouble, and a number of times Larmour and Ringrose were caught man and ball. They were trying to pass while being tackled. And
now, quick question there. There would be some who, if that was an Ireland team who had done the same thing, they would say, well, that was an adherence to a game plan and they didn't have the freedom to react. I would presume that at Leinster they have a bit more freedom. If Joe, maybe let's accept Joe Schmidt is probably pretty dogmatic, but I would have thought Lancaster and Cullen would have no problem whatsoever with Ross Byrne going off script.
They wouldn't. But he did. I think the issue was Ross Byrne didn't work it out for himself on the field. I think what happened was...
That can't be that... Not to simplify the game. There's either a rush defence or there's not. So when you have a rush defence, I would have thought...
I think it's harder than you're making out, in the sense, like, it's obvious when you're sitting looking at it that, to put in some variation and put some doubt in the opposition defence's mind. But it takes a lot of confidence for a 10 or anyone in the back line to maybe go off script. I think they're certainly empowered within Leinster to do that. I interviewed Jack Conan on the field after the match, and I wondered, had there been a message from management with 15-20 minutes to go, because I could see Scott Fardy and Rhys Ruddock kind of rallying the troops in a couple of huddles, and it looked to me like they had a change attack in terms of they started to do driven mauls off line-outs, and they tightened it up. You can see Fardy, he's like a father figure, like, come with the hour, come with the man. This father figure with the young guys around him, he grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and said, we were tightening this game, we're driving lines. So I asked Jack Conan, had that been a message from management, and Jack kind of scoffed at me and said, absolutely not. He said, we changed that on the field ourselves, of our own accord, on our own volition.
It's impressive.
And it was very admirable, because in that kind of stressed environment that they're in, to have the capacity to think clearly under pressure like that is immense.
And it proved to be the right thing to do as well.
It was.
The nature of the game.
Yeah. So I suppose when we were talking about Ross Byrne, just to circle back on that, to nail that place kick with a cramp, having not played so well, having not adapted all too well to the pressure situations in the game itself, to go and do that, I think it's hard to quantify how impressive that was.
And are you surprised? Okay, so I totally appreciate your point that this is all not as easy as it might look from the stands or on TV. Are you surprised that it wasn't communicated one way or another, either from a senior player alongside him or either from management looking down at him to say, look, Ross Byrne, maybe just think about mixing this up a bit, a few little kicks in behind, give him a bit of help here.
I think the difficulty with this in any kind of top level game is they dedicate their entire week to prep work and a plan, and it may change from week to week, and it will certainly be dependent on the opposition and the traits of the opposition. But if you work to a plan you have to try and execute that plan for a period of time in the game in order to see it work.
You have to give it a chance. I accept
you have to give it a chance. I think what they were doing was trying to continue with the plan, albeit a little misguided. But at what point do you abandon it?
It's an interesting question. I would have thought in the current climate, Andy, that rush defence could be definitely a possibility. It's proven very successful. I think if you're doing your plan during the week now against any top-level coach, you would say to yourself, there is a chance, given what we've seen, even in the Six Nations alone, that they may try and come at us very fast and very hard. If that happens, let's just run a few drills and this is what we're going to do. So I was surprised, actually, that maybe they didn't have a plan B for it.
Yeah, I suppose they did. I think they really got to the pitch of the game with that about 20 minutes left.
But like that, if Stockdale scores that try, then you're really behind the eight ball then. So it's an interesting one. I'm sure they'll be talking about that this week, I think
they will. I think you should have. I mean, I know from my own experience as a 10. The older, the more my legs had gone, the quicker my head was working.
And the cruel ironies.
And but certainly I would have had a rule in my own mind going into games when you played against the rush defence, that you react immediately by, you either change the point of distribution. So Ross Byrne had in latter stages had two distributors outside him really, and Noel Reid and Ringroses. You get players, trail runners running off the 12 or 13, so you change the focal point of the attack. You do short, tight passes as opposed to long, loopy passes, because that gives the defence, or you do a chip or a grubber, and it's literally those 3 or 4 things, and you probably ought to do all of those things in succession, but you certainly don't play wide passes from your 10. You don't take on too much pressure, I suppose, as a 10. You try and offset the pressure that's on you. But they didn't do any of those things. So I would have thought they'll sit down and have a chat.
Put doubts in that rush defence's mind. The last bit of ammunition you want to give that rush defence is confidence.
Exactly. And I think they fed the frenzy. Darren Cave had a field day coming up, and they all seem to have a field day on Ringrose. Poor Gary was, I think, trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat at stages and panic, and 2 block downs deep in his own territory as well. They were out of character for him as well.
So there's a few extenuating circumstances. Obviously they're fresh off of Six Nations and they are the bulk supplier to the Irish team, so it's going to disrupt them more than most. And then for all the talk of Leinster's strength and depth, which is obviously incredible, the 55 players they've used across this season.
Yeah, I have a big on that.
Yeah. Pro 14, that's going to get you through a lot of games. Maybe the pool stages of Champions Cup will get you through certain games. But there probably just does reach a point where if you're missing Sexton and Henshaw and Devon Toner, and then by extension James Lowe and Josh van der Fleer, and Sean O'Brien is still coming back, with 50 minutes in him.
Yeah.
No province, region, club can cope with that.
No, and look at also, you say who they're missing there from their current squad, who they've lost.
Sure. Joey
Carberry, Easton Asiwa, Geordie Murphy. They're like 3 international top-class players, and very, very hard to replace those guys. So for me, they're a significantly weaker squad than they were last year in terms of personnel, and now they've got a horrific injury for Dan Levy. You see Van der Fleer on crutches. Sean is kind of battling for form as a 7. and then they're suddenly looking a little vulnerable coming into a semi-final.
Well, if they have to go to Paris, that gets scary.
Yeah, it does. I just don't see. I mean, yesterday I marvelled at that match. I just thought it was one of the best games I've seen in a long, long time, and everything that is good about rugby, the integrity of the players, and even the honour, being down at pitch side, watching the honour in like the physicality, and afterwards the level of compassion they showed towards Rory Best, towards Dan Levy, towards opposition players and coaches, commiserating with guys. Jordy Murphy looked crestfallen coming off the field, and kind of a tear rolling down his cheek, and every single Leinster player hugging him. It was everything that's great about the game. And I couldn't help thinking, I said, I don't think Leinster are capable of winning this European Cup. All the, I suppose, the razzmatazz that happened, the physicality, the intensity of the game, my kind of cold feeling walking away from it was, I don't think that's a European Cup winning team this year.
So expand on that. Say we have the headline of this podcast, Andy Dunne. I don't think Leinster can win the European Cup.
I'd love to. I mean, I'm a Leinster supporter. I'd love them to.
Give me your reasons.
I think it's exactly the point you mentioned, the strength and depth. I think the likes of a Jordy Murphy and a Siwa, a Carberry as a backup. I mean, they ended the last 10 minutes yesterday with Noel Reid in at 10, who's not a 10. He doesn't play there. They didn't have a place kicker on the field at that stage. If it came down to the nail biter stage, Johnny's injury profile is an issue, and Ross is obviously a very, very able deputy, but it just looks a little thin.
Yeah.
And when you look at Saracens or you look at the top French clubs, I think it might be a stretch too far to go back to back on the back of last year. I just think they're gonna creak at some key point in a knockout stages, semis or final.
It's hard to argue with it. They haven't hit the heights of last year at all this season. By the way, Toulouse leads 7-0 after 8 minutes. Anton Dupont with a try converted by Zach Holmes. If Toulouse win, then it's a semi-final in Dublin.
Yeah.
Which would lead to a bit more...
You've quite a beef about this.
Optimism. No, I don't. No, I'm surprised. So if Racing win, obviously it's in France, and I was just under the assumption that, as with previous years, it would be at a neutral venue in France.
Yeah.
So now it seems if your stadium is of a sufficient size, I don't know what the requisite attendance would have to be, but if it's big enough, and certainly U Defence is big enough, then it will be on that synthetic pitch. I don't have an issue with the synthetic pitch, but it will be on that pitch in Paris. It will be their home ground.
Yeah.
And I thought the neutral venue in a country was working okay. It was certainly an advantage, and it was an incentive. But just for the integrity of this massive game, a semi-final, I don't know if it should be in your home venue. It just tilts the balance way too much for me.
Yeah.
It's tough enough for Leinster to have to go to the south of France.
Leinster have had the same in Aviva.
Look, Leinster definitely are bending that rule. There is an issue.
We've got to acknowledge that.
And maybe you could have an asterisk whereby, well, if you play X number of games at this stadium in the pool stages, that can't double up as your neutral venue. So then it has to be Croke Park or whatever. Fine. It's a real, do Dublin play at Parnell Park or Croke Park? What's their home stadium? Look, the Aviva Stadium, that could have been asterisked, and maybe they have to do something with that. But I just think in the main, I don't think that should be on in the...
I tend to agree,
It's a semi-final. Like the integrity of the competition. There has to come a point where you want to find the best team. And home advantage, especially in rugby, most sports obviously, is such an advantage. Look at the Six Nations. Say England were playing Wales, or Ireland are playing England, or Wales are playing Ireland. I think I said Ireland are playing Ireland there. Whatever, take the various England, Wales, Ireland combinations. The one kind of itch I had after the Six Nations was, God, I'd love to see those games at a neutral venue. Be interesting.
Yeah.
And I think for the semi-final of the Heineken Champions Cup, you have that.
Yeah,
fair
point. It's a fair point.
That's all I'm saying. It just came as news to me.
Yeah. No, a few people mentioned it yesterday as well.
Oh, we were into the south of France again. Toulouse 7-0 though. So, Aviva Stadium. Actually saw it. RDS. So, Munster. We were, myself and Neil were chatting. So, if people didn't see this game, First 20 minutes or so, I mean, Edinburgh were completely on top.
Yeah.
Almost in the Munster 22.
Yeah.
Keith Earl strikes. Then you get to a point where 52 minutes gone, Munster kick for the corner.
Yeah.
And that ends 6 minutes later with a scrum, and Edinburgh get up the pitch. I think Schumann has a turnover, and they're further up the pitch. And at that point, before Pierre Schumann then assaults Tadhg Beirne, you're kind of thinking, this is not going to happen for them.
Yeah. I don't want to gloss over the Earls try that happened early doors. That I was confused looking at it in terms of how the referee dealt with it, and then certainly the reaction. So Pyrgos is in. He's at Conor Murray's laces. Really, he's trying to disrupt play.
Very briefly, why, when the referee, you can imagine, is shouting at him, don't do it.
Yeah.
Hey, don't do what you're about to do. We can all see what you're about to do. You've gone and done it.
Yeah.
That level of stupidity, I couldn't quite understand.
It's hard to fathom.
He would have known he was about to give away a penalty.
Yeah.
I could have just tackled Murray.
Yeah, it was pretty silly. But what happened afterwards was,
who hasn't suplexed a man?
Yeah. It was a suplex, wasn't it? In terms of WrestleMania, he picked him up and suplexed him over his back, and the referee just said that's fine.
Yeah. So if you didn't see it and you're listening on the radio, Conor Murray picked up Pyrgos, threw him to the ground really, which allowed Keith Earl's tap and go. And
he actually bear hugged him. Pyrgos was in front of Murray. Murray bear hugged him and flipped him back over his own shoulder onto the ground.
Why did Pyrgos not go to McAnally and then McAnally not go to the referee and say, you need to have a look at that?
Yeah, there was two guys shouting at the ref. Maybe that was the issue. They're shouting and being abusive. If someone calmly had gone and said, can you please check that? And sometimes the referee might be more responsive.
Well, if you're turning over the Tadhg Beirne incident, you probably have to turn over the Conor Murray incident.
Yeah, I mean, Earls was very smart, showed experience, I suppose, he was very quick-witted and opportunistic. So very, very smart from Earls. But the path was made for him by a suplex by Conor Murray, as if that's what we're calling it. So, they got away with it. But yeah, it's 14 semi-finals in Europe.
18.
It's the knowing how to win when not playing well syndrome.
So for the last number of seasons, there's been an element with Munster whereby they get lots of things right. Their defence this year is the best in the competition, but there was always a sense that their bubble is the semi-final and they're going to have to be a better attacking outfit if they want to get to a final and beyond. Racing last year almost marked the end of Keatley's time there. There's a sense this has to change. So this season, Joey Carbery arrives. Gloucester home and away are moments where you think, they're knitting new bits together here. They're a different proposition. So how worrying is it then that they pitch up at Murrayfield yesterday? And I appreciate they're also just off the back of a Six Nations. And so are Edinburgh. But they pitch up at Edinburgh and their attacking game is completely neutralised.
Yeah, it's certainly a worry getting into knockout stages of a cup competition. But I do think they've got combinations right. I think when fully fit, hopefully Carbery at 10, Scannell and Farrell. That's a brilliant combination.
It all looks good on paper.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering how Edinburgh managed to neutralise it so well.
It's again, you could throw in the accusation that there's a lack of variation at times.
Right.
And I do think that's a common thread in a lot of Irish performances, and certainly then the provincial sides, is a failure to vary the game. And when you don't vary the game enough, and that's through attacking kicking, through defensive kicking, tactical kicking for corners, like the back in the days of Raj and Humphreys, and that's an area we're not seeing utilised very well. And across the board, of all our provincial out halves, we wouldn't have a very recognisable tactical kicking guy. We don't. Johnny doesn't do it a huge amount, even though he had a superb year last year. He was World Player of the Year, probably not using the tactical kicking side of his repertoire. And Carbery certainly wouldn't be renowned for it. Ross Byrne has a very good crossfield kick and uses it to great effect. So, but across the board, I think it's an area that's a bit undervalued and underutilised. So when you add that into your attacking arsenal, you become a bit less predictable. I think passing your way out of trouble, using forward runners coming around the corner off 9 is a very... it's a difficult thing to defend physically, but it's not a difficult thing to defend mentally.
Yes.
You know what's happening, you just have to be big enough and bold enough to stop it. And when you get to crucial games and people are working at a high level of arousal, they're physically right up there, they're going to stop those moments and those runners. And I think we need to just add in a little bit more nous, a bit of kicking and variation to just break that up.
Okay.
You know?
Our rugby coverage is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. We're here with Andy talking through the action yesterday. So, in broad terms, Munster going to Saracens at the Ricoh Arena is not very appetising. They put 56 points on Glasgow yesterday. They're a serious team. Can Munster go there and hold them out?
Yeah, I just have this sneaky feeling about Munster this year, and it came from the back-to-back Gloucester games. Actually, I figured at that stage this is a team that could go all the way. I've felt that, and even though it was an underwhelming win yesterday, I think they have a good attitude. You know, they're in the right frame of mind. They're nuggety. They're very resilient, and they're very, very hard. If they are to lose a game in a semis or a final, I think it's going to be by a point. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone's going to turn them over in an overwhelming way. So I just have, I suppose, a gut instinct more than anything else that I think they've a chance to pick off Saris there. Yeah.
For Keith Earls alone, lots of people would love to see them do it.
It would, yeah.
He is just... What he's done with his career in the last 4 or 5 years is just so admirable.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of a tricky Six Nations, he was consistently good. Really hard to be good in a team not performing.
Yeah.
He managed that. And, his second try yesterday is just a finish.
Yeah. Well, he's very interesting because I think he's really grown, and in experience he's learned. I think the biggest thing he said he's learned is he just doesn't take his work home with him. You know, the game is the game. Then he goes home and he said, I think he was interviewed talking about just go home, see the kids, forget about it. Like, stop carrying it around, stop carrying the mental baggage of a mistake or carrying the glow of a win. He's level-headed throughout. I think that probably gives great confidence to guys around him as well, and I'm sure he imparts his experience and knowledge to younger guys. So he's I spoke about Fardy being like a father figure in the Leinster setup, and he probably looks a bit more paternal, and he's tall and has a beard, but Keith is a younger and fresh face, but certainly a father figure, and I think in that Munster setup, and a reassuring guy and a reassuring presence. But he's been quite something to watch for the last couple of years.
He really has. It's great. He's got his preparation right. Too big for a while and then too small, and just seemed to find his way, and he's the last link to 08. He was an unused sub that day. There's great shots of him in a bib looking about 8. So I think he's desperate to win.
I actually played
title on the pitch.
I played for Ireland Day against Scotland Day, and was his first Ireland Day cap. And you'd spend a long time guessing what the scoreline was in that match, and you wouldn't get it right.
Okay.
76-6 to Scotland.
Yikes.
Yes.
Well done, Andy. You brought shame in the country.
And now I'm on national radio pontificating about rugby.
This is what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, this is what they're all doing wrong.
How did Keith Earls play?
He dropped the ball in the dead ball area, trying to clear to touch, and their flanker dived on it. That was the first score of the game. Okay. So I shouldn't really be on radio talking about anything.
You dropped the ball, or Keith Earls did?
I dropped it. Yeah.
Okay. How did Keith Earls do?
Well, I think he was shell-shocked, 76-6, it was his first. Frankie Sheehan's last game for Ireland Day, and mine.
Well.
And correctly so.
Okay. Yeah. You said it. Listen, thanks a million for coming in.